Hey guys, I'm Izdaisho and I'm here to talk some zombies today, and we're just going to be running this Deadwalkers deck, and I'm going to be able to show you how I run mine, and there's probably going to be some differences between my deck and yours, but this is pretty much the way I decided to. So for a while I wanted to run it as a really aggressive deck, and then I wanted to have a much slower deck but still with some aggressive elements, but I think I landed somewhere in the middle, leaning more towards the aggressive deck, with just leaving a couple of the more expensive spells in there and then still have 24 lands. 24 lands is not bad because it just means that you'll draw more often, you won't get screwed as much. So even though a lot of my spells cost 1 and 2, and I probably don't need more than 3 lands or 4 lands to win the game, I think it's still okay, and I do have a lot of 4-drops, so having 24 lands isn't bad. But anyway, let's just get started with this deck guide. So, Gravecrawler is just one of the best cards in the deck. It pretty much was very potent in Standard for a long time when it was in that, well, I guess it's still in Standard, but it's about to leave, I guess. Anyway, it's just a really strong card. It's a 2/1 for 1. 2 power 1 mana creatures are really good in Duels of the Planeswalkers, all of them, and it's very good in this one as well. And then you also just toss on the fact that if you control a zombie, which this is a zombie deck, you'll probably be controlling a zombie, you can cast it again. Just basically means that you can cast this guy forever. The only thing you have to worry about with this creature is can't block, so don't rely on it to block, I guess. It's pretty simple. And if you're playing against the burn deck, they can get rid of this guy if they use Pillar of Flame or Disintegrate. And I may as well just talk about that as a whole. If you look, a lot of your cards have this clause of when they die, X happens. So for instance, Dralf's Messenger has Undying, which reads, when this creature dies or goes to the graveyard, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter. And by the way, these two things are synonymous. Going to the graveyard and dying are the same action in Magic. So those things don't happen when the creature's exiled. So when they cast a Pillar of Flame or Disintegrate on it, then that doesn't happen. Your Dralf's Messenger is gone forever, it's not coming back. If you have a Black Cat out, then your Black Cat will not make them discard cards. So anyway, it's just a little bit of an aside. They gave us a couple of Diregraph Ghouls. Obviously it would have been nice to have 4 Diregraph Ghouls and 4 Gravecrawlers, but you know, you take what you can get, and 5 good, very playable 1-drops is a nice way to roll. Quest for the Gravelord, I didn't have it in originally, but there's just so much removal in this deck, and you gain so much advantage out of just like suiciding your Gravecrawlers in, and getting a 5/5 eventually for your 1 mana seems pretty worth it. So I definitely say you should include that one in the deck. Vampiric Tutor is an interesting card. It's a tutor and you can search your library for anything, and it only costs 1 mana, but it does have a couple of downsides. Number 1, you lose 2 life. Not always too relevant, but sometimes when you're playing against one of the other aggressive decks, that 2 life can actually come back to haunt you. The other thing is that it only puts it on the top of your library, so this basically is card disadvantage. You play this card and you don't get any value out of it. All you do is get the hope that the card that you put on the top of your library will give you some extra card advantage. And that's usually going to be true, especially with this deck, because it doesn't really suffer from card advantage, because Gravecrawler can come back and that usually helps. But you just have to be wary when you're playing this card, and don't just go ahead and look at Vampiric Tutor and be like, wow, I need to play that card, because it was definitely a consideration that I wouldn't toss it in there. Bloodghast is weird because it's not it's a vampire. It's not a zombie, but it's still a really good card, and I don't think that you have no excuse not to play it. And there's also a bit of sacrifice in this deck with the Fleshbag Marauders, sacrificing your own creatures and stuff. So it's a pretty good card, and it'll come back. It's just another good threat that you can have on your side. Anyway, I run both these Butcher Ghouls. I don't love this card, and it's not nearly as powerful as something like Gravecrawler, but with all of your other zombie lords pumping it up, it generally is big enough that it's annoying for them. And then if you have something like Grave Pact down, it's obviously really good. It works well with the Fleshbag Marauder, so it just synergizes really well with the deck, and it also allows you to cast your Gravecrawlers again. So I like this guy, and he's a pretty decent 2-drop, so he's my favorite of the 2-drops that they gave us, although I pretty much hate all the 2-drops. So then there's Black Cat, which is just a card that I think is really bad, but a lot of people misplay around it, and then they won't attack you for a while because they're just terrified that they're going to lose an important card in their hand. And they're scared to block it. And with the Lords, you can generally pump it up, so it's not just a 1/1 for 2, which sometimes it is, and then it's really bad. But I only included 2 of them, and I just tossed in a walking corpse as the third one. See, he's a zombie, but he doesn't really synergize with the sacrifice element of the deck, whereas Black Cat does. So that's why I didn't include both of the walking corpses over the Black Cats. But anyway, we've got a couple of Doom Blades. Nice, unless you're playing the Mirror, in which case you're really sad. Even the Masks of the Mirror deck has mostly black creatures, I think. So, yeah, it's not too great. Sign in Blood, just a good way to find some more threats. I like running it in this deck, I think. Not 100% sure, I guess. Anyway, now you get to their 3 drops, which are probably the best cards in your decks. Lord of the Undead is obviously insane. Gives your zombies +1/+1, and you can activate this ability to get your zombies back. So after you used your Geralf's Messenger twice, made them lose 2 life, and throw 2 creatures at it to die, you can go ahead and get it back with your Lord of the Undead, so that's always nice. Another combo that I really like is Fleshbag Marauder with Lord of the Undead. If the game is going late, then you can just play Fleshbag Marauder, sacrifice it to itself, and then your opponent has to sacrifice a creature, and then you can just go get it back with your Lord of the Undead and do it again. So you can basically play Fleshbag Marauder every turn for 5 mana. Death Baron, this guy's sweet. He's a Lord, gives your creatures +1/+1, and also gives your creatures Death Touch, which is really sweet with something like Butcher Ghoul, and a lot of your other creatures do. Speaking of Death Touch, this guy already has it. So this is a weird card, but I think it's just too powerful to not put in the deck. I mean, a 4-mana 4/3 Death Touch with a sweet ability when it hits them. Like, it's not even just that they discard a card. They discard a card and you get a zombie. So that seems really sweet. They just have to block this guy every single time. So yeah, I like him, and I think that you should put him in the deck. Undead Warchief might just be the best of your lords because it gives your zombies +2/+1, and it also lets you cast them for cheaper. So it says zombie creatures you control, so not other zombie creatures you control, so he's going to be a 3/2. But a lot of the times you won't want to attack with him because you might end up having him die in combat, and that's not going to be good. Grave Pact is really powerful. Generally, when you get this card out, your opponent is going to have to be very, very ahead on board. Otherwise, they can't attack because you can block with 1 creature and then basically kill 2. Or if you double block something and kill it in combat, then they have to sacrifice another 2 creatures. So they're not really going to be able to do normal creature battle that well after that happens. Tendrils of Corruption is really sweet for gaining you some life, getting you right back into games. I mean, when you're on the defensive and they just are attacking you relentlessly, then you can kill one of their stronger creatures, because you can generally kill anything with this. It's for you're playing it for at least 4 swamps, so you're going to be able to deal a bunch of damage, gain some life to stabilize you. It's a really sweet card. And then obviously when you're on the aggressive, if they play a stabilizing creature, then you can generally just get rid of it with this thing. So I like this card. It only costs 4 mana, so that's not too bad either. Mutilate is really good in this deck because a lot of the times your threats are going to come back, either being Grave Crawlers or Butcher Ghouls or Geralf's Messengers, or if you have Cruel Revival, then that'll work. But I'm not running that many Cruel Revivals, just 1. Anyway, Consuming Vapors is really awesome. Rebound, for those of you who don't remember, is the beginning of your next upkeep. You can cast that spell, so when this spell resolves, instead of going to the graveyard like a normal spell, it'll get exiled, and then you can cast it again at the beginning of your next upkeep, and then it'll go to the graveyard. So you basically get to cast this spell twice, and it's a pretty decent spell. It's not insane, but it's not bad either. I like it. Cruel Revival, just too many 5-drop removal spells isn't really that good, but I decided to include 1 just as another way to murder people. And again, if you're running 4 of these and 3 Doomblades, then you have a lot of dead draws in the mirror. And while that's not so relevant, that should be about 1/10 of the games that you play are against this, and probably a little bit more since it's one of the better decks as opposed to something like Masks of Dimir, which you don't see too much because it's pretty terrible. Anyway, the last 2 cards are just super powerful cards that I felt like they should be in the deck, even though it could be run a little bit more aggressively with the 7 1-drops and the 11 2-drops. But there's Grave Titan, obviously an insane card, and Corrupt. And both of these cards can help you win the game on the spot, and they're really nice. So I only included 1 Corrupt because there is a Vampiric Tutor in this deck. So if I need it, then I can go fetch it sometimes if I happen to draw the Tutor. And while I wanted to include 2, I couldn't really justify having that many 6-drops in this deck because a lot of the times you're going to win the game with these cards stranded in your hand, or lose the game with these cards stranded in your hand. Anyway, let's look at Vial of Poison. So this card I think is terrible, but when you think about it, it's not as bad. So the real issue is that it's an artifact and not that it is a... it's an artifact, not that it's a sorcery, or an instant, rather. If it were an instant that was just 2 mana, give a creature death touch, then it might be a little bit better, because a lot of your things come back, so you can block something bigger and then basically get it killed for free, which is somewhat nice. But I guess one story that I'll tell you about it, which was really funny, my opponent was playing it against me, and I had an It That Betrays out. I attacked, he sacrificed his Vial of Poison, I got the Vial of Poison on my side, and he did manage to kill my It That Betrays, but I managed to get it back later. But yeah, that was just pretty funny, I thought. Anyway, Reanimate is a card that probably some people are going to suggest, but I don't really see any reason to play this card in the deck. Most creatures, you don't really care about them dying because they'll come back, and I don't really want to play this card for the few cards that it'll matter. This deck doesn't have any element of discard or anything, so it's not like I'm going to be able to cheat out cards early from my opponent's side of the board. And, I mean, for the nut draw chance that I'm going to have a Grave Titan and a Reanimate in my opening hand, I don't think that it's really worth it. So I don't like to run Reanimate, but you can if you want to, if you think that it'll work out for you. Black Cat, we already went over Black Cat and Walking Corpse. Exhume, there's really no point in this card being in the deck. It's very good in like combo decks where you're trying to get your very powerful cards in the graveyard very early, and then you're like, Exhume, you don't have anything in your graveyard yet, but I have this 10/10, so you gonna die now. Shrivel, I don't think is really enough of an effect on the board sweeping capabilities for it to be relevant against anything. Maybe Avacyn's Glory, but that's also only if they don't have an Honor the Pure, so it's not very good. Soulbleed, this card is terrible. I mean, they've printed cards for this converted mana cost that not only does this effect happen, but they also can't attack or block. And yeah, it's just not good. Grim Return, I don't know why this is a card. You need to have so much mana for this to do anything, and I just really don't like it, so I'm not going to include it. Death Cloud, this is one of the most interesting cards in the deck, and I was trying to include it for a while, but then every time I drew it, it was kind of just like, alright, well, I can either craft the perfect situation for when this is good, or I'm just going to hold this in my hand forever. And sometimes it can really get you out of a sticky situation, but you have to have a lot of mana, and you have to be playing against the right deck, and I mean, you have to have the right board state too, because if you don't have any Undying creatures, then you can sacrifice all your stuff, and even if you've got a Gravecrawler or two, then you won't be able to cast them until you get another zombie out there. But it's definitely a really interesting card, and I will definitely high-five anybody who puts it in their deck, because that is pretty ballsy. Anyway, Abattoir Ghoul, I thought that this card is actually pretty good in the format. It's very stabilizing as a 3/2 first strike, and it'll gain you some life back, so they really can't attack you. And I just didn't want any more 4-drop zombies. It's nowhere near as good as the other ones that I have in the deck. Alright, Endless Ranks of the Dead. Let's talk about this card for a little bit. So at the beginning of your upkeep, put X 2/2 black zombie creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is half of the number of zombie creatures you control, rounded down. This card is one of the worst cards in the deck, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to run it, and I'm sure I'm going to get a bunch of comments that are like, Daisho, put Endless Ranks of the Dead in, it's won me so many games. And to that I say, this card is terrible. It takes so long for it to do anything. So if you played on turn 4, you had to have played 2 zombies earlier for it literally to do anything. Not only that, your opponent can't kill any of your creatures. For it to literally do anything the turn after it comes out. All my 4-drops do something, and they have an immediate effect on the board, with the exception of the 4/3 that attacks the next turn, whereas this one will make 1 zombie 2 turns later and it will attack. If you're at an extreme parity, which is super rare with this deck because most of your creatures are very offensive and you have a ton of removal to push through damage, so you're either losing a lot or you're winning a lot, and it's, oh my god, this card is so terrible in almost every situation. But I'm sure it's going to win you a few games, and you're going to be very happy when you see it, but you're not going to be very happy most of the time when it's sitting there in your hand and your opponent's beating you down and you can't do anything and you wish it was a removal spell or a creature. But anyway, Veilborn Ghoul is in the deck because there's a lot of sacrifice, but it does cost 5 mana, and I don't think it's really worth it. The effect is pretty sweet, obviously, and it's an interesting card, but some people were playing this card in Standard, not even ever casting it. They just had it with Faithless Looting, which is draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards. So they would draw 2 cards, they would discard 2 cards, being a Veilborn Ghoul or 2 Veilborn Ghouls or something like that, and then play a Swamp, get them both back, and then basically just use Faithless Looting as a draw 2 card. But anyway, Farbach Boneflaker is a pretty sweet card, but I don't think it's quite strong enough at the mana cost. So actually maybe I should put it in instead of like this Cruel Revival, now that I think about it. But anyway, Cruel Revival, destroy target non-zombie creature, return up to 1 from your graveyard to your hand. It's a pretty sweet card, but it's really expensive, and I don't really need that many effects. So then there's a whole bunch of 6-drops in this deck, and 7-drops, and I just don't really like any of them. I mean, well, actually that's not true. Mikaeus the Unhallowed is obviously a boss, and he has a sick ability, but I mean, he just doesn't do enough that... Okay, so when you play a Grave Titan, the game literally just ends. If you had nothing on the board, then your opponent has to be able to answer this and then still have to deal with the 4 power that this guy brought to the table. When you play Mikaeus the Unhallowed, sure, it's actually really good if they don't have removal, but if they do, then it's terrible, and it doesn't do anything for you, and I really expect a lot out of my 6-drops. As you can see, I'm only running 2 of them in the deck. This one is a sorcery, so it'll basically have its effect right away, and this guy is just ridiculous in that he brings 10 power the first turn, and then if you don't kill him, then even more. And I think that as a creature, you need to have more of an effect immediately on the board for me to want to play it. I mean, obviously, the fact that your creatures get +1/+1 and have Undying is really good, but I don't know, I can't justify putting it in the deck. But if you do, then I definitely wouldn't hate on you, because it's a really, really powerful card and it does a lot of stuff. It's just I don't really like the 6 mana cost, and that's why I'm not playing it. Same thing for Nightmare. I mean, very big flyer. I just don't think that the deck needs it. This deck doesn't have trouble winning that it really needs 6-drops to help it out. If you want to run the deck more aggressive and put in the Cruel Revivals and Farbach Boneflinger and then Death Cloud and stuff like that, then that's fine, and I think that it's a pretty viable deck. I just want to run it a little bit more aggressively, but I couldn't justify taking out something like Grave Titan, so that's what I'm rocking here. Zombie Apocalypse, your zombies are almost never dying anyway, so I mean, if Avacyn's Glory, if you knew you were playing against Avacyn's Glory, you'd probably play it just as, alright, if we get to 6 mana, we're going to win because we get to destroy all his creatures and get all of ours back. And then there's Grave Betrayal, which I've had destroy me before, but I'm not playing a 7 mana enchantment that doesn't do anything the second it hits the table. And then here they gave us a nice little mythic rare at 9 mana, so no matter what this, literally whatever this card said, unless it was, quote, you win the game, I would not play it. And even at that 9 mana you win the game, it's hard to justify putting that in your deck, because you generally win the game at 4 or 5 mana. So anyway, that's the deck. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree because you've been disagreeing about all of them, but a lot of the times you disagree on different cards. So if I included Reanimate and then I had to take out Bloodghast or something like that, and somebody would be like, Daisho, I can't believe you do that. Or if I took out a Walking Corpse, then people would be like, Daisho, you don't have enough synergy in your deck, you need to include more zombies. So there's just a whole bunch of different ways that the deck can be constructed, and I think that this is the way that I've been running it, and I've been having a lot of success with it, and I hope that you guys enjoy the video. Have a wonderful day. Bye. Hey guys, I'm Izdaisho, and I'm here just to show you the build of the deck that I'm going to play the games with. I actually recorded the deck guide, then I recorded the games, and then I recorded the deck guide, then I changed up the deck a little bit, went back to record the games, forgot that I had changed the deck. So I guess I'll just show you the cards that I had. I wanted to test out Mikaeus because I kind of batched on it a little bit in the deck guide, and I'm not sure if it's good or not, so I just tossed it in there. And then I tossed in the second Corrupt, and Nightmare, only one of them, but man, Nightmare is he just ends the game so quickly, he's so cute. Second Cruel Revival, and then Death Cloud, my favorite card, just because sometimes you just cast this card and there's literally nothing your opponent can do. They lose all their cards and their lands, and it's so funny, and sometimes you can just cast it for 7 and end the game because you deal 7 life to them. And the cards that I took out, I mean, it still has this aggressive element with all these 1-drops and a bunch of 2-drops, but I took out some of the 2-drop creatures to make room, and when I say some of them, I mean all of them. I took out Bloodghast, Black Cat, Walking Card. I don't know why I took out Bloodghast. I guess because the deck isn't as aggressive the way I have it. And I took out Vampiric Tutor, which is a little bit questionable. But, you know, when I do things, I really like to do them to the extreme. And I find that with my deck building, I'm always going to either go one extreme or the other. And I'm not sure if that's always the way to go, but I like to be either like very, very aggressive and take out all of the top end, even the expensive and like the powerful spells, or I like to be very, very controlling and make sure that I don't have any cards that might not be good in a control deck. So for instance, Vampiric Tutor seems good in a control deck, but it is card disadvantage, which isn't what you want. And a lot of the times, since the deck is so streamlined, you're going to be searching for a card that might have already been on the top of your deck, and you lose a couple of life, so I don't know. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this little addendum to the deck guide, and have a nice day. Bye.